Are you using Mac?
Now, how about now? Yes, because I heard you weird as well. I think it's just my headphones. Okay, but I think we can do this without the headphones. Okay. But now you hear me fine, right? Cool. Okay. So, sorry for this. I mean, it's always like this, right? I'm also going to be switching in between cameras, so maybe we're going to have some difficulties in between, but we'll figure it out. Anyway, everybody, because we're only half of the group anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead. Welcome to this course. So this will be the two people that will be leading the course. I'm Sarah. I am the left person in these two pictures. I am an interaction designer in the Media Interaction Lab. So the lab works with smart textiles, if you don't already know it from before. And my research specifically is about how do you communicate interaction in this medium. So because it can be, the sensors can be very hidden, like how does a user know where the interactive area is? How do they interact? What do they need to do, and in what way? Kind of how big, with how many fingers, things like this. And then the other person that will be doing this course is Michael Haller. I guess maybe you already know him from before, so he's been a part of this university for a while. He just recently moved to Italy, but he's still a part of the lab as well as the university, and he will talk more about this in his lectures. So to shortly go over what will be happening in this course. So it's mostly split into the workshops and the lectures. The workshops you will be doing with me. So these are exercises that we will be doing in ProtoPie. So this is a software that I will present today. And then mostly we will do, like exercises where I would show how to do things, and I encourage you to follow along as well. Because at the end of this course, you will be asked to hand in your own ProtoPie project. And I will also present today what the theme of this project should be. And then I think these two things will have a short intro, this thing and this thing, this thing and this thing, and then we'll just go straight into the workshops, and we'll spend the rest of today as well as Wednesday just doing these exercises. And Michael in between will just have two lectures that are maybe a bit more general, but still kind of related to the topic of design, interaction, perception, things like this. So I'm assuming that most of you don't know ProtoPie yet. So ProtoPie is a software for prototyping mobile interactions. It is like primarily it was designed for mobile phone interactions, but it covers a really broad range. This is why I like it, because it goes from touch screen, but you also have keyboard interactions, but you also have like it taps into the sensors of the phone, like I can use the mic or the camera or the tilting sensors or whatever, and use all of these modalities as interaction inputs, or even as outputs like vibration or things like this. It can also connect to Arduino, which is a very cool thing for combining external inputs and outputs with sensors. I'm going to show a few examples like this today. And the creators of ProtoPie basically managed to boil down interaction to the most basic three components of any interaction. And these are an object, a trigger, and a response. So an object is just, if we stay with the GUIs, let's say it's just one graphical element on your screen. Then the trigger is the action, that is usually the interaction of the user, or it could also be a sensor change, but let's say that a user does something on the screen, and then what happens to that object as a response. So all interactions could basically be boiled down to this very basic structure. So we need all of the three components, and we need all of them in this order. So object first, then trigger, and then response. But then each one of this can really go into from as easy to super complex. We have really a lot of kind of like maneuver space here. So this is what I really like about ProtoPie. However, everything, even the very complex things, everything is still very easy to interact, very quick to prototype, and the program itself is quite intuitive to work with. So I don't know if you've already downloaded it and looked around, but we will do it anyway today together. So you'll see it's really easy to use. So let's go into each of these three categories, just a little bit more into it. So the objects are here on your upper left side when you open the program. It can be, objects can be imported from also other programs. I think ProtoPie is compatible with at least Sketch, Figma as well, maybe Adobe XD. So we can also like import graphical elements or layouts that we've designed somewhere else, and it's supported by this program. So this is super cool if you would have like very complex apps or whatever with a bunch of graphics already designed somewhere, and then we just import it. We can import media that can be pictures, GIFs, videos, audio, whatever. And we can, of course, also create design in ProtoPie itself, which is mostly what we'll be doing in this course, or at least today. So we can do shapes, basic shapes. You can imagine what this is. You can imagine what the text is. And then containers is kind of like looping elements with the purpose of creating a certain type of interaction. We're going to have a look at this in more detail today as well. So I'm going to show a very, very basic example of how each of these three components, so the objects, the triggers, and the responses would work. And I'm just going to kind of, I have pre-built it and we'll show it here. So the most basic example of an object, I drew one square, I gave it a green color, I gave it a specific size, and I placed it somewhere on the screen. That's it. It's just flat, it's lying there, it's not doing anything, but it is an element. And then our second big category is triggers. They are on the right side of the canvas. So this is the canvas in ProtoPie. And then we can add triggers, and they are, again, from very easy to more complex. These ones are kind of limited to the touch screen itself. So, you know, taps and double taps and dragging and pinching and rotating and all of these things. Of course, although ProtoPie is primarily made for the mobile, it doesn't exclude the desktop. So we still have like mouse interaction or keyboard interactions if you would want them. And then what I find especially cool about ProtoPie is, as I've already mentioned, we can use kind of like some of the sensors that are already in our mobile as well as external sensors. So I haven't yet found a program that is working so nicely and easily with Arduino than this one does. So this is a really big plus. But let's stay with the basics for now. So if we go back to our very basic example, we still have our green square at the same place, and we're just adding a trigger. In this case, a trigger is a tap. Of course, because you can't see it, it's just simulated here with this dot that simulates me tapping on a screen. And then something needs to happen. So these are then the responses in ProtoPie. They are always kind of dependent on the trigger. So a response cannot exist if a trigger doesn't exist. So you will also see in ProtoPie, you can't open this window unless you have some kind of a trigger selected. And then here we also have very different things from easy to more complex. Let's say an object just moves somewhere, it rotates, there's a color change, whatever, to more maybe fun ones. So you can tap into the camera and something can happen on your phone, or it can play back something, it can vibrate. There's a speak and listen command. This we will also see today. This is really cool, I think. So our basic example, this is then the last step. So we have our green square, we have the tap, which makes the green square move from position A to position B. And this is it. a very, very, very basic example, but it follows the logic of these 3 blocks. And then, like I said, each one of the blocks can then go into heights of complexity however we want. So this is the basic of ProtoPie. I realized that this was a bit abstract, so I'm going to show you a few demo scenarios so that you can see in person how this would look. So how I got into ProtoPie, it was about a year or 2 years ago. It was in collaboration with KTM. We started developing an HMI dashboard for an e-bike or an e-scooter, actually. And we wanted to kind of think further into, like, to expand the interaction possibilities between the human and the machine, as well as the machine to the human. So kind of like in both of these 2 directions. And I was thinking very much at the beginning of this project, whatever, you know, the scenarios will then realistically be, how can I prototype them so that I can include interactions that a person will do on the dashboard, including interactions that a person will do on the handlebar, including the interactions that maybe somebody would like to connect to the phone to. So that's how we eventually came to ProtoPie. And I made up this 6 imaginary scenarios of something that can happen to a driver on their drive somewhere. And they are also connected to the Arduino. So these 2 are Arduino sensors that, like, so they react and they pop up a message. These 2 tap into the internal hardware of the phone. Then we have one just screen interaction that shows how that would work. And then this one is actually also an Arduino example. So now I'm going to show this to you live. So I'm going to switch my camera and hope that all of this still works. Do you see my second camera?
Yes.
Yes.
So hear me also? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So we have some sensors here connected to the Arduino. We have our phone. Most of the things will happen here. So I'm just going to connect these 2 things together. Okay, let me just connect to ProtoPie here. Okay, I hope you see the mobile screen as well. It's not super easy to record a screen, but okay. You see this? More or less?
Yes, we can see it more or less. It's
more
just
or less, right?
a little bit like.
Yeah, right. So I'm gonna be switching it around. I'm gonna try my best. Okay, so we have the same 6 scenarios that I showed you on the desktop already. So we have the first light scenario, and we have a light sensor here, this thingy. So less light, a bit more light, and we can add even a bit more light, even a bit more light. And what you see is that the light of the imaginary motorbike is also changing. So when there is less light, this light becomes brighter, or when there is more light outside, so this is a fake example, but let's say that it's measuring the light from the outside, then the light of the motorbike itself automatically adjusts. So that was the idea here. Then we have a second example that is rain. So this is this sensor here. It's a water sensor, and it simulates what would happen. For example, if suddenly it starts raining, what would your machine do? Let's add some water here. And you see that automatically it put on an error message that is saying, okay, the road is slippery, we've turned on mode, and when it's dry again, this goes away, automatically, everything through a sensor. So this is another example. Then we have the tilt. So this one will be just digital. Hopefully you will see this. So it's kind of imagining as you are driving on the road, there is a certain like tilt that is okay for the driver of a motorbike, but if you lean in too much, there is a danger of you falling. So this is what I'm trying to simulate here. So this says risk of falling, and I'm tapping here into the hardware of the phone. So this is just the internal tilt sensor within my phone that is measuring how much I'm tilting. And whenever I reach a certain degree, it displays this message, risk of falling, so you should be careful. Okay, then our next example is just on-screen interaction. Let's say when you have low battery on your e-scooter, this screen pops up. It says charging stations, it's a button. You press on this and you get like a list of stations that are somehow nearby. This is again just an imaginary link, an imaginary list, but what I want to show is this link here that you click, and ProtoPie automatically connects to something external, like to a website or maps or whatever you want it to connect to. Then we have voice. I hope this will work. So this is then connected to the microphone of my phone, and it has a phrase here that I've programmed to be listening to. It says, take me home. And when I'm going to press on this, the microphone will turn on and start listening. Take me home. And it did work. So it opens up, again, maps, but it could be any other kind of link. And in this case, because it's a KTM project, it goes to KTM eTechnologies, but whatever, it can go wherever you want. And then the last example is connected to this button here, and it works like a horn. So you're driving along the street, something's happening, and you want to give attention to other drivers, to yourself. So this would be a thing that was very useful for me to understand this logic when I wanted to translate it to the handlebars of the motorbike. So this was the same logic that we introduced. Okay. So that's our 6 scenarios. Okay, I'm going to come back here now. So you see me again. Do you still see the presentation also?
No.
You don't. Okay, then let's go back to the presentation. Okay, here. Okay, so now that you have a basic understanding of what ProtoPie can do, I wanted, before we start with the practical exercises and the workshop, I wanted to present the project theme to you so that you know what you will need to implement, because then as we're doing these examples, maybe something already like sparks your imagination, or maybe you get some ideas throughout the workshop itself. So I'm going to present this before we go into the workshop part. So you will need to implement a dashboard feature for a vehicle of the future. So it's somewhat similar to what I showed here. And also out of these 6 examples that I showed here, 4 of them, let's say 4 of them, we'll see how far we get, we will implement together through these exercises as well. So we will be mostly working on dashboard features. So you are also required to do a dashboard feature of your own. However, you don't have to be limited to an e-bike or even your car. It can be any kind of vehicle of the future. I mean, you can be as creative as you want, but we won't actually judge your creativity. Like, this is still a prototype course, so we will judge the software skills. But we can go crazy, and I want to give a bit of a range here of what we can imagine these projects to be. I'm still the designer, so I have to like think about these kind of things. So dashboard features are basically any kind of communication elements between the driver and the vehicle, or the other way around, or the driver and the surrounding elements, or the vehicle and the surrounding elements, again, in both directions. So as I mentioned, the examples that I was showing were for a motorbike. So for me, a lot of the communication elements just happened on the handlebar. However, if we have a look at the car example, there's also a lot of visual things. Maybe there's some like touch screen buttons. We can have voice. It depends a lot. And ProtoPie also allows a lot of these possibilities. Also, we could have a communication between two phones. So then in this imaginary scenario, one could work as the dashboard and the other one could work as a remote control kind of. So there's a lot of possibilities, like in the real world as well as in ProtoPie. What you decide to implement depends on what kind of a vehicle of the future you would imagine. And a vehicle of the future can be in the very near future or the very far away future. What I'm showing is for an e-bike that will probably be out in the next 2 or 3 years. So it's actually quite near, but we could go into the very far away future. So here underneath is an illustration of a car that was in Blade Runner. So, I mean, it's a car, but it also can fly and it's super complex. So you can kind of try to think about what would be an interaction between a user and this kind of car. Generally, science fiction is a good like starting point to think about crazy ideas. I mean, a lot of people have thought about this before me as well, or you, or all of us. But it is still, I stand behind this. It's a good source of inspiration. But also a good source of inspiration is what is currently around us. So you can also look at the car that you're currently driving, or if you guys are motorbike drivers or whatever, you have a drone or whatever, you can look at the features that are already there and what you could imagine you could improve through ProtoPie or do differently, or some things that are maybe missing or whatever. Now, then we can think about manually or automatically operated. I guess most of the vehicles that we're currently using are still manually operated. However, I give here an example of Tesla because it has this nice kind of like going from manual onto automated driving. So you would have a lot of features that are kind of interactive on screen, which maybe isn't quite conventional because a lot of manually controlled cars still have like buttons somewhere on the vehicle, somewhere on the wheel, or somewhere in the control unit or whatever. To like content-wise features. So what other things would I ask of a car if suddenly, in this lower example, if I am not the driver anymore? So this is an example of the iNext from BMW. This was shown at CES a couple of years ago. So if the vehicle is completely automatically driven, then what you need from it, or basically what you need from it is completely different. So everything here is actually voice controlled, or something is even controlled through a textile on where she's sitting. And all the graphical elements are just displayed directly onto the window. So there's not even really a screen kind of. Everything is really like merged one into another. So the interaction becomes really natural, kind of, that's the idea. Then I think this is also an interesting thing. So whether the vehicles of the future are owned or shared. This is one example. It's an app that's called Smart Start that allows you to remote start your car. It also has like options of find your car. Let's say if you're in a parking garage and you don't remember where exactly you left your car, this helps. Or you can open the trunk of your car remotely, to the fact that it has kind of a maintenance list, let's say, of what is happening with your car. If you would leave your lights on accidentally, it would be here. Or if the alarm went off and you're somewhere super far away, you don't actually hear it, but you get a notification that something is happening. These kind of apps, I mean, yeah, let's leave out whether they are super valuable or not. But I think in the future, when we're talking about car sharing, I think these kind of things maybe become more interesting to think about. What are really valuable features that you might need? So from how would you book something to how would you unlock the car to whatever you might need, to personalization of the interior, whatever. So you probably need some kind of a connection from your car to your phone, and then what are the features that are happening there? And then the last thing, everything that we talked about so far was mostly on land. However, vehicles are not only limited to on land. I gave most of these examples because they're also the most close to me. But if somebody is really into drones or boats or whatever, you can also implement features for a drone or a boat. So there's one example here. And also this example underneath is, I think this was done for Amsterdam Drone Week or something like this. And it's just a platform where everybody registers their own drives, and then so it's kind of like a control of air traffic in a way. So you would book it online, but then it would also tap into where is your drone being, to how do you control it, to how long can you be there, things like this. Okay, so this was our intro. We looked into theoretically what ProtoPie is, and we gave a short introduction into what your project in ProtoPie will need to be. If you have some questions, just shout them out. I mean, this goes for now as well as for the rest of today as well as Wednesday. I would suggest that we move to ProtoPie. Did you guys already download this? So we need ProtoPie Studio on your computer. We need a ProtoPie player on your phone. And we need a resources folder that contains like some icons, and then Arduino stuff will be for Wednesday. Does everyone have this already, or do you need a few minutes to download it? Okay, yes, as in you have it. Because then I can move to ProtoPie as well. Okay. And now you see ProtoPie, right? And hopefully you have a screen like this as well. I encourage you to follow along with these exercises. Of course, you don't have to if you don't want to, but they were meant in a way that you do. We also have smaller groups so that you can jump in with questions, or I can help you out if certain things are unclear. So again, yes, please say something in between so that I know that you're still there, but also if you have questions, just shout it out, or if I'm going too quickly or whatever. So we have this screen here. So this is just basically how ProtoPie looks. We have objects here. Just to give a quick reminder of what I already showed in the presentation, then we have triggers here. Once we choose a trigger, we have responses here. So these are our three main building blocks. But let's start with the canvas. This is this thingy here. So we will implement, like I said, the same sketches that I have shown on my ProtoPie, so on the phone. So I'm using a Nexus here. So I'm going to choose a Nexus, but choose whatever your phone is. This just means that the resolution will adapt to the screen that you're actually using. However, if it's not actually precise, it doesn't mean that it will get distorted in any way. It just means that you will get some black frame around it, but it's fine. So I'm going to choose a Nexus, and I'm going to choose the landscape orientation because we are faking it to be a dashboard. So if that was too quick, so I chose an Android Nexus orientation landscape, and then OK. And we are first going to start with something similar to a home screen that I showed there. And then we will implement the charging example, so the battery example, the voice example, and the tilt example. I hope we will manage all three today. If not, one of them will move to Wednesday. And on Wednesday, I will show the connection between Arduino and ProtoPie on the example of this horn that is like played when you press a button. But today we're going to start with 3 examples, and let's just drag in the icons that are in the resources folder. So this is the other thing that you needed to download. And in the resources folder, you have 2 other folders. One is the Arduino example, which we won't be using today, and the other one is icons. And within these icons, we're going to choose the charge, the tilt, and voice. And we're just going to drag and drop them into ProtoPie. So that's
is there a link to download these assets in the channel, or where is it?
Yes. So in the general channel, so where you saw the link to ProtoPie, there was also a link to. Wait, let me just copy it again. Okay, this one.
Okay, yeah, I found it.
Yeah.
It was the collapse there.
Yeah. Okay. So we have these 3 icons. You're also going to see that all the objects or all the elements that we'll be importing, they will be listed here in layers. These 3 elements, they already have a name. However, I encourage you to give all elements names because once you have 100 elements, this becomes a mess. But okay. So if we imagine that this is a home screen, then we don't really know that these are clickable objects, right? So we somehow need to communicate this interactivity. So yeah, I'm a designer. We will generally in this course not go too much into design. However, I can't go past certain things. So we will talk about at least the basics. So how do you make something seem more clickable? Maybe you already know a lot about this, but I like generally what Google material design guidelines are saying. So what we're going to do is we're going to simulate the height of this element by giving it a bit of a shadow underneath. What you see here on the right side, these are all basically design elements that you can choose. So we have position, we have size, we have rotation, we have origin. This, I always like to put the origin into the center versus, for example, as it was before here. So this becomes important when we have responses like scale or rotate or things like this, because if the origin is not in the center, then the whole thing will, rotate on this point versus in the center, or it will scale into this point versus into the center. So I always put everything into the center because usually otherwise I just get frustrated. I'm going to do this for all 3 of them. Okay. And then we have, yeah, some options here, opacity, radius. We're going to add this as well, but we're going to start with the shadow. This is the only thing that we're going to add because I also kind of like the minimalistic look of this. And it gives a feeling that it's kind of closer to us, so we feel like we can interact with it. And just to make it a bit more pleasant to the eyes, let's give it a bit of a radius, 10, something like this. And let's say that I like the design of this element. You can also decide to give it a border instead of a shadow. And then here you would choose a color, the filament, the width. You could choose to fill it with a certain color. Yeah, there are a few design options here that you can choose. Also within shadow, you can choose what kind of a color this shadow has and how big is it and how blurred it is. Yeah, but let's say that I like this. So I'm going to do the same thing for the other two as well. So fill is OK, no border, shadow, and 10 radius. And the same for the last one. Shadow, radius. Okay. So I have my 3 elements here. So they're still objects. Nothing is actually happening with them, but we are designing them towards them becoming buttons. They are completely randomly placed on the screen right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to select them all and then ask the program to organize it for us. So we have the alignments options here on the top of the design panel, let's say. So what we want to have it, we want them to be in the same line, so aligned in the middle. And we want them to be distributed horizontally, which means that the space in between these two is the same as these two. And that's what this button did. And then we're just going to place them in the center, and we see that these red lines in ProtoPie already kind of give us hints on where the center is. So we're just going to align it centrally. And we have our 3 objects. So because we are creating this sketch, we know what these 3 icons mean, but as soon as we want to show it to a user or our test person or our friend, whatever, we need to communicate to them what these things are. So we're just going to add a little text box here that will be a bit of an explanation of what is happening. So that was just text, and then I draw the square here. And we will call this charge. And we have, again, some design options here. You can choose the font. There's quite a lot of options here. I mean, they depend what you have installed on your computer. What you always need to be careful about is that when you change the font, you will always need to install it on your phone as well. So this is why I usually am not changing the system default, because then it always gives me error messages. If you want to do it, of course you can, but be careful that once you will open ProtoPie on your phone to test the sketch, you will need to import the font as well. So for our case, I'm just going to use the system default, but let's make it black to give it a bit of a character. It's not so important, so let's put it in a gray color. Let's align it in the center. Let's maybe give it a bit of letter spacing. Maybe a bit more. So what I'm doing here, these are just like design options. It can be this or it can be something else. What we find visually appealing is also different to each person. So it's really up to you. But let's say that I'm happy with this. And I'm not going to add like any fill or border or shadow here, because this will not be an interactive element. This text is just here as explanation, nothing really more. So I'm going to leave it as it is. When I move it around, I also see that I get some like guides in correlation to the icon so that I can keep it somewhat central or centered. Okay, and then we can just copy paste elements. So I'm gonna copy paste. I see in the layer that the second one was created as well on top. It's always on top. Then I'm just gonna drag it here because I'm going to keep all the same design parameters. I don't want to go through the whole thing again. So I'm just copy pasting it and changing the text. And let's call this voice. And let's do the same thing again. Select something, copy paste. We have the third layer here. And call this tilt. Let's put them a bit lower and then center the whole thing again. Okay, and let's say that I'm happy with this. Okay, how are you guys doing? Following along? Yeah, awesome. Okay. So the reason why we did this home screen is because we will create different scenes. So as you also saw on my phone, we kind of switched from one to the next one, and they are, yeah, just separated into different scenarios, or as ProtoPie calls them, scenes. And we will also do this in the same way. So let's call the one that we are having here open now. So we can rename it just by double clicking on the current name. Let's call this home screen. And then we're going to add another scene for each one of these three examples. So let's open a new one. This one will be, what did we call it? This one will be charge. And another one will be voice. And another one will be tilt. And these are basically the three examples that we will want to implement today. And what we want now is that when you click on one of these icons on the home screen, you want to jump onto a different scene, onto a different scenario. For example, when you tap onto the charge, you want to be linked here. When you tap onto the voice, you want to be linked here. When you tap onto the tilt, you want to be linked here. So let's do our first interaction. We're going to click on the object. So as I said, you always need all of these three elements. You need an object, you need a trigger, and you need a response. So if one of them is missing, you're going to see an error message. I'm also going to show you how that looks. So you first choose an element and then you add a trigger, and our trigger will just be a tap. So let's choose a tap. And we see here on the right side, so previously these were our design options, and now we have interaction options. And here we have this list of objects in which we can choose from. So let's say that we didn't take care about this order. Let's say that we forgot to choose an object first, and we just went straight on to add trigger because we have in our mind what we want, and we of course expect ProtoPie to know. So add trigger tap, we're going to see that this is orange. So orange means that something is missing in ProtoPie. And in our case, we also further see what is missing because this is also colored orange. What is missing to him is that it doesn't know which object we want to interact with. So here we choose an object, we choose this icon. Okay, and we have our tap, so we have our trigger. And now we need to add a response to it. And a response will be to jump. So these would be kind of on screen. and here are the not really more complex, but so these are external responses, and then phone responses. We're going to see some of them today. We're going to see some of them on Wednesday, but also just explore them on your own. Right now, I'm just going to tell you what it is. So it is a jump. Again, we have selected a response, but it doesn't know what exactly we want. So where do you want to jump? So again, we need to select an object, but in this case, it's not really an object, it's a scene. So when I click on to the charge icon, I want it to jump to charge scene. So hopefully this works. And let's try if this works. So we have an icon here that is called preview. Preview means that it will open up a preview on our desktop. So we are now simulating how interaction on our mobile phones will work before we have connected to mobile. So let's say I click on charge and I was linked on this scene that is currently empty, so we don't actually know what happened, but we can assume that this was correct. However, we want to go there and go back. So let's go into this charge example and let's just add a close button to it so that we have both of these two interactions and that we see 100% that this is working. So let's go into the charge scene and let's add an icon from the resources folder, an icon that has a name, exit. Just drag and drop it and put it in the corner. In this case, we're not really going to change much from the design. We're going to give it origin in the center just so that we don't get confused later. What might be interesting later on at some point. So I've already designed this icon in a way that it has this white space around it. So it's already like the object area is already bigger than the actual design or the actual icon itself. If I would not do that, so if I would just have a tiny X here, I could add this extra space in touch area. And I could add, let's say, 10 pixels around it. So this means that a bit more of the area around our object is still considered interactive area. So I don't have to press super precisely on an object that is just, I don't know, 10 pixels big, but I can add a bit more of area so that it's easier for the user to make like more precise interactions. However, like I said, in our case, it's actually already done, so I won't use this. You can if you want. It's up to you. And what we want to do is we want this to close, so we're actually going to design it as the exact same interaction as it was before. So when you tap on the object, we want to jump back to home screen. So we have an object. We're going to add a trigger that is tap, again, the same one. We're going to add a response that is, again, the same one, jump. And we're going to jump to home screen. And now we have this loop, hopefully, in between these two scenes. Now let's see if this works. So we go into preview. We're going to tap on charge. We come onto charge screen and we close. So this loop works. Does it work for you? Cool. Okay, now let's also see if this works on our phones. So hopefully you also downloaded ProtoPie on your phone. So once you open it, it looks like this. One thing that you need to be careful about with connecting ProtoPie from Studio to Player is that the two devices need to be on the same network. So they need to be connected to the same Wi-Fi. Otherwise, it probably won't work. Once you have that, you click on the device and you get this QR code here. And you can click on your phone, scan QR code. It usually works, but it doesn't work for me. So what I need to do is I need to go into options here and then type IP address manually. And I always have to do this on all devices. I don't know why, but okay, that's how it is. And then it connects. And I also see feedback already here that it's connected to my phone. And I also see my phone already here. And then I'm going to see if the same logic works. So I'm going to tap onto the charge icon. I got an X, I'm going to close it, try it again. So it works for me. So that's the logic. So is that still working for you too on the phone?
I have always connection failed.
Yes. So one very common thing is that you are not on the same Wi-Fi. Are you?
Yeah, I'm in with my phone. I'm in the hotspot of my computer. My computer is in the Wi-Fi from the FH.
I am not sure if a hotspot is enough. I think they actually need to be on the same Wi-Fi.
I can't connect with the school Wi-Fi. It doesn't work. I don't know why.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's odd. Okay. Then I don't have a solution for this. Yeah, I think this is the error. Do you get any more information in your error message? Like, does it give you any more instructions on what you need to do?
One moment.
Because one other possibility, however, in your case, I'm pretty sure that it's the network, but one other possibility would be that you need to somehow open in settings some options. Okay, so if anybody else has this kind of a problem, but is sure that they don't have a problem with their Wi-Fi, then you can have a look at this link. And there you have enabling USB debugging on Android. So there are some options there that might potentially be problems as well. It's basically just one of these two. I haven't yet come across a third option. So you can try these two things, but if neither works, then you'll have to like fake your interaction on this preview, at least for now, and then try at home if it works. Does anyone else have any problems? No? Okay, so are you all doing well, or did you get lost somewhere in between? Okay, I'm gonna hope that means that you're doing okay. Okay, then I would say let's do one more example, one quick example, and then we can have a bit of a break. But let's take maybe a voice example, because this one is also quite easy to implement. Yeah, I think it should be fine. So let's go into our voice scene here. So I'm operating now on the voice screen, and we're going to add some elements. We can start primarily with the X, so that one will be actually present in all of our sketches. So we can just copy paste it onto all other scenes as well. So this one was placed in the charge, but we can copy and paste it here as well. It automatically goes into the same place. It would also keep all of the design options. It didn't, however, keep the interactions. So this one we will need to do again in each scene. So let's just do it so that we then don't have to think about it again. So we have our object, add trigger. When you tap onto that object, you will jump back onto home screen. And let's do the same thing for our last scene as well, for the tilt. Copy paste it here, add tap, and the response is to jump back to the home screen. Let's just quickly check if this is all working. So we go into preview, we tap on charge and we get an X. We tap on voice. And this doesn't work yet. Okay. So let's connect them together in this case as well, because we only did, we only added a trigger to this one, but not to these two. So let's just add this as well so that we have all 3 loops done, and then we can just go into each of the scenes individually. So we have this, the icon for the voice, which will be the example that we'll be working on now. So we select an object, we add a trigger. The trigger will be the same as before, so it's a tap, and the response is to jump to a scene that we've called voice. So we're doing very simple interactions here, and they're all the same. It's just linking us in between different things. So again, we have an object, we add a trigger, it's a tap again, and the response is again a jump, and our scene is called tilt. Okay, and now we should have all these 3 loops done, and let's see if they're working. So we go on to preview, and we tap here and we get an X, and we tap here and we get an X, and we tap here and we have an X. Okay, so that all works. That's pretty cool. And now we have our basic logic working, so we can go into each scene individually and work on interactions there. So let's start with voice. This is this scene here. So voice will be basically this thingy here. So we will have a voice command, we will listen, and then certain things will happen. So let's see how we did this. We have an add trigger that is, so here we don't have an object because we're going to start with a voice command. Actually, we will need to start with the listening command. So let's do this a bit the other way around. Sorry, I jumped this a bit too quickly. Let's do the object. And let's add an icon that is just the same icon that we were using. So it's a voice icon, this thingy. And let's say that when we tap this icon, the system starts listening. So what I did wrong before was I just went into this voice command, but this voice command needs to first know that it needs to listen. So I already can read this here, use the listen response as a separate interaction for this to be able to work. So this is what we're going to do first. We're going to choose this object. And when I tap on this object, I basically give it permission to start listening. And I have a response here that is listen and start. It could also be stop. So once you want it to stop listening, you can also have a very specific like button that says, okay, now all systems down. But we want it to start listening. And only then do we do a voice command, which just means that it's listening to a very specific phrase. And we now need to include here what this phrase is. It works very well in English. I've noticed that it has some other language options as well. I have to say I haven't tried it. It definitely doesn't speak Slovenian. I don't know about German, but English works well. And let's give it an English command here. And let's just use the same one that I did before. So it says, take me home. Again, it can be whatever you want. It can be this, it can be something else. It can be more complex, it can be more easy. And after speaking just means that it will listen until it hears this whole phrase. We could also do while speaking. So this means that you could do, for example, a voice transcript. So it would continue listening for as long as you're talking. And let's say that it would be writing down all the words that you're saying. So this would be, for example, where you would use something like this. And also you see when I clicked onto the voice command, it became orange and it showed me why it's orange and what is unclear to it. And it means, it means that I needed to add a phrase here. And that phrase is take me home. Again, I know what this phrase is, but if we will give this to a user or a test person or a friend, they don't know what they need to say. So we have to write it somewhere on our screen. So let's do that now. It's a text field. It's not interactive on its own. It just gives additional instructions or explanations. And we're going to put it in this quotation marks so that the user knows that it's something that they need to say. And let's write take me home. And let's give it some of the same design options that we had before, just so that we have consistency through our ProtoPie here. So we have the same font, but let's keep it bold. Let's put it in the middle, and let's not give it any letter spacing this time. Okay. So we have our command here. And now what we want to do is go back to this voice command. We have our phrase written here. We've told the user what they need to do. However, now we need a response as well. So we go into this plus icon here and we choose link, because we're going to link it to an external Google Maps link, which we will need to add here. So I will go onto my browser and look in Google Maps. And I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm going to choose the address of KTM. Again, what you put here can be anything. It really doesn't matter. You just need to have a link. Let's go back to ProtoPie. I have my link here, and I copy paste it inside. So this is a Google Maps link, but it could also be a link to a YouTube video or I don't know, anything really. You have quite some options here. Okay, this should work already. Let's see if this works. You can try it again on the preview as well, because it should work with the mic in your laptop as well. Let's see. Take me home. Okay, for me it did work. I guess you don't see it because I'm just sharing ProtoPie, but this did work, and let's see if it works here as well. On phone. Okay, so I have the sketch here. We need to give it permission. Take me home. Take me home. Okay, so this is working on my mobile as well. How is it for you all? Did it work? Did it not work? Do you have issues?
It works for me.
Okay, awesome, very cool. So one thing that bothers me a little bit, and maybe you've noticed this, is when you tap on this, you don't actually know if it's listening or not. So what I want to do, and I did this in the previous sketch as well, so we're just going to add this, is when you tap it, we also want this icon to go away and put a small red circle there, which we associate with, okay, now it's recording, but in our case, now it's listening, so that we know, okay, something happened, so that you don't have to tap a bunch of times and you don't get any feedback whether you're doing things okay or not. So let's do this now. Let's go into shape and oval, and let's draw a little circle here. And let's give its origin into the center. And opacity is okay. Let's give it a red color. Okay. Let's put it in the center. Maybe it can be even a bit smaller, say 15. Okay. And now I want these two elements basically to interchange. And there is a few different things on how I can achieve this. And this is also what I like in ProtoPie. So you can really, once you kind of like map out the interactions in your head, then there are quite a lot of different ways on how you could achieve this. So in this example, what I did here is I have this black square here as a separate element. And then underneath this black thing is the red dot. So I actually have kind of like 3 layers. And then I'm just reordering them. So you see here, reorder, reorder. I can do it like this. This would be one option. The second option would be scaling it from 0 to its size and then back to 0. What we will try to do now, and let's see if this works. Maybe we will go back to reorder at some point, but let's see if it will work with opacity. So we will start by having this icon in 100% and this orange, in this red dot in 0. This is how we start. And then as we tap on this object, you also see that when I choose the interaction, it automatically highlights which object am I talking about, which object correlates to this specific trigger. So we know that this is the one. It also starts listening at the same time. And when this happens, I want the opacity of this icon to go, and I can choose, for example, opacity drop by, I don't know, 20 or 2. In our case, we will choose an absolute value. We want it to go to 0. And we can also like choose how it's going to do that and how long this transition is going to take. We want it to happen quite quickly. We don't want any delay. And as the same as this is happening, we want the same thing, but in the appearing sense. So we want the opacity of the oval dot. We want that to go to 100. And we want that to also happen very quickly. Okay, I think this should work. But let's see in our preview. So what I want to do is when I tap on this, I should see the red circle appearing. At the same time, the mic should start listening to me. So I will see the mic indicated here if I see it. Yes, so this works. Okay, let's see if this works on our phones as well. Take me home. Cool. So for me, that was working. Let's now just arrange these elements a bit nicer. So we want them all to be aligned in the middle. And in the middle. Okay. Okay, so that was our first example. So we have it on home screen. When we tap onto the voice icon, it leads us here. When we tap onto the mic, it starts listening. We get the visual feedback from this red light, from the red circle that it's now listening. We say our command and a link opens. And then we can go back to our home screen. So let's just show this whole journey again in the preview. So we choose a voice. We tap here. Take me home. And it opens a link. And then we can go back. So that's it. That was our first sketch. Are you all doing okay? Did you manage to do it? Did it work? Do you have issues? Is anything unclear? Are you even still there? Okay, I see some thumbs up. Nice. Okay, then let's just do one final thing, which is to save this somewhere. Then we can have a bit of a break. So save. Wherever. Test. Okay, and that was it. So in the end, I'm also going to show you how we can do the upload, or like how you could upload things onto the cloud. So you have personal clouds, as well as I can also invite you to our own space. So when you will do your own pies, you will be invited to upload it there. But we can have a look at that later on, or maybe even on Wednesday. Okay, so I would say maybe let's do a bit of a break, let's say 15 minutes, and then we continue with the next two scenarios. We still want to do today the charge and tilt. The charge will be this battery lists that you've seen. So we're also going to talk about design a little bit, and then the tilt should be another simple example for the end. And that will be it for today. Okay, so let's say 15 minutes. So until 10, 20, let's say till 25. We meet back at 15:25. Is that okay? We have 17 minutes actually. Cool. Cool. Okay, then see you in a bit. If in between you come up with any questions, please keep them in mind and we can come back to it. Okay, see you in a bit. Okay. Is everyone back? Do we have to wait a bit more? Did anyone come up with any new questions in the break? No? Okay. Okay, then I guess let's continue with our ProtoPie sketches. You see again my ProtoPie screen, right? Okay, so we have two more scenes that we would like to do today. So let's start with the first one. This will be charge. So we are from the home screen. We are continuing with this first icon. So let's say that when the battery of our vehicle runs low, we get a pop-up message. We can click on charging options or like where are charging stations near me. It opens a link and then things are further linked to external links. So this is what we're going to create. So let's go into our resource folder, into the icons that I've sent to you, and there you see a battery GIF. So let's drag and drop that inside of our ProtoPie. And this is an icon that pops up when battery is low. It happens automatically. Usually people know what it means, so we don't have to further explain it, but we will add an option of clicking on a button that will link you to this list of charging stations. So let's go into text and create a text field here. And this text field will just say charging stations. And we will use a bit of the same of the design options that we had before. So we're gonna give the origin of this text square into the middle. We're gonna make the text bold. We're going to center it. We're going to give it a bit of letter spacing. And now what we're going to do is, unlike all of the text that we've been using so far, we're actually going to make this whole text field a button. So let's also make it maybe a bit smaller. And so then let's also consequentially put the text in the middle. So it's kind of starting to look a bit more like a button. Let's use the similar logic that we did on our home screen. So we're not going to give it any fills or any borders, but we're going to give it a shadow that will kind of give it this illusion of being elevated, so therefore more pressable. And let's also give it a radius of 10. So now we have a very similar look than we have here. So let's say that if a user already has this knowledge of how interactive objects look, now we are kind of following with the same logic here as well. So our text field has become a button. We can also give it color if we want. We can make it bigger, smaller, whatever. We can give it a bigger touch area. So here you have a lot of design options. It's up to you how you want to do them. Let's also align this a little bit. So we're going to choose both of these two objects. We go here into align objects and align it in the center. And put it in the center. Okay, so we have our first button, or we have an object that will become a button. So what we want to do is, and we have here again a few options of how we can approach the design of this. So if you remember, when I showed you the example, when you press this button, it kind of pops up this gray list of questions. So we're actually going to create all of these objects first, because they will come one on top of each other. And only then will we start creating interactions, because we will actually have to, in this case, create them from back front. So we will first do all of the objects, and then we will start with the last interaction and go to the previous one, and go to the previous one, and go to the previous one until we come to this one. So for now, we're just going to start adding layers, let's say. We're going to do the design first. That's what I want to say. Okay, so let's do a shape. Let's do a rectangle. Let's put it just somewhere here. Actually, it's going to be bigger than the screen, because we will be able to scroll it up and down. So just to like have this logic, it doesn't have to be much bigger. It's just so that we know how to prototype this interaction. So we're only going to make it a bit longer. So we have our list. This is what will pop up. Let's give it again an origin in the center. And let's also make this look a little bit nicer. So let's give it some radius, let's say 10. Because it is a result of a button, I also want this to have a bit of height to kind of give us this perception idea of things being closer to us, so that we know that we are kind of in this second layer of something that came on top. So we're going to add a little bit of a shadow here as well. But it's very subtle. And I kind of like that it looks so subtle. Again, you can choose the design options however you want. It can look like this, it can look different. I do want it to be in the center. And let's say that this is our background list. Now we're going to add some text to it. So first we're going to give it a title that will be charging stations near me. Maybe not all in caps. Stations near me. And let's make this bold. And this time I'm okay with it being on the left side, because we're going to start just creating a list then here underneath. Let's maybe give it a bit of like a separator in between the title and when we start our list. And we can do this just by creating, there isn't an actual line, at least not that I would see it. If you find it in Protopile, let me know. So I usually do these separators just by creating a very thin square, which is basically what a line is. So let's give it 1 pixel height, say that this is okay. And then we're going to give it a fill. And let's make it black. And then we have something that looks like a line. So that's okay for me. I'm happy with this. And then we're going to start creating a list. And our list will basically be, yeah, I think we don't need to complicate it. So we're just going to say station 1, what would be a name if it would have a name, then how far it actually is, and then a link or a button that will link us to a website that will open Google Maps to take us directly there. So we have 3 text fields. The first one is just station 1. So this would be the name of the station. The second one will be how far away it is. And let's say that it's 0.5 kilometers away. And the third thing will be a button. And let's just call it, I think we had just go in the previous example. It could also be directions or something like this. And now we're again going to use the same logic. So we're going to make this whole text field a button. So we are going to give its origin into the center. We're going to give a bit of weight to this so that we have kind of similar designs throughout throughout all of our scenes. We're going to keep this in the center. We're going to put this in the center as well. We're going to give it some shadow and radius of 10, or maybe here less. Yeah, let's do 5. So radius of 5. So you can experiment with these options here a lot. You see that we have a lot of things that you can change just as far as design goes. But I'm not going to go too much into that. So then let's arrange these 3 elements. Let's align all of them in the middle. Let's align, distribute them horizontally. Let's put this a little bit on the side so that it looks better. Okay. So now I have the station 1. Let's say that it's done, at least as far as design goes. Now we're going to see how containers look. So actually, I'm going to do one more change, which is that I am going to put the text here in the center of the box so that they are all centered, because this one is also in the center so that there isn't like a few pixels of difference. Okay, whatever, this was a detail. Okay, now let's group these things together. So we can just select everything that we want and put them in a container. Like so. And we say which 3 things go inside. So we have our station 1. Sorry. Let's just do it like this. Station 1. 3. And let's put all of this into a container. Okay, no, I did this in a confusing way. Okay, let's do this again. So this is our station 1. This is why I mentioned that it's good to give names to our layers so that we know what we're doing. Okay, so this is my first text option. This is my second text option. That is how far away it is. And the go button. Okay, so we want these 3 things to be grouped together. So what I did was just right click and create, no, sorry, not component, container. Like this. Okay, so we don't have, okay, we put these 3 elements inside of a container. And this, what essentially it does, it's just a group. So we give it a frame. It can also be bigger, it can be smaller, whatever. And then we place things inside of it. And then whenever I'm moving around this container, all of the elements are moving with it. So it's essentially just a group. And the reason why we did this is because I don't want to recreate each of these elements again and again. I'm just going to copy the containers again and again so that we create this list. So I'm going to give this container a name, station 1. I'm just going to copy it. And we have station 2. And I'm also going to rename it here. And maybe let's pretend that it's a bit further away. So how I get into one of the containers is just by double tapping on that. And then each of the elements inside of it, I also just double tap and it becomes interactive and I can change the text. So we have station 2. Let's do station 3. Let's do station 4. So these are all just copy pastes now of the same thing, just so that you get an idea. We're not going to go through all of the details, but this is the basic logic. Okay. And let's say that 5 stations is enough. I intentionally want one of them to be outside of the frame, because once we create like a scrollable container, it means that this list will move up and down on our screen. That's what we want to achieve. So let's say that our list ends here and it begins somewhere here. And we want all of these containers to be distributed vertically. So that means that the space in between them is always the same. Okay, I'm a bit bothered that this is exactly at the edge, so it's going to put it a little bit more down, and consequently this as well, and consequently this as well. And let's realign it again. So we choose all of them and distribute vertically. Okay, now we see 3 objects we will see on our screen. So this is how it will look. We will see 3 of them, and once we add interaction, when we will scroll up, we will see the rest of this list. Okay. Is everyone still here? Is this going too fast? Was it confusing? Yep. Or is it okay? It's okay.
We are still here.
Still here. Cool. Okay. So now we're going to start with the interactions. And this is what I mean that we're going to go basically from back front, because once we will be done with each interaction, then we will hide this object and go into interaction underneath, and then hide that object and go into the next interaction. So this button is the last button that we touch. So this is the last interactive object that we need. So here we're going to start here. So how I got to this object, because it's in a container, double click the container and then double click the object. And then we have this one selected and we add a trigger, and that trigger will be tap. And the response of this tap will be to go to an external link. Now I will go into my browser and into Google Maps and just repeat this exercise there and ask what the nearest station to me is. Nearest charging station. Okay. Whatever, it's somewhere, it doesn't really matter. So let's take a link, copy that link, and paste it here. It can be any address. Obviously, it can also not be Google. It can be any internet address. So what will happen is once we tap on this button, it will open an external link. The same thing goes for all of these buttons. I don't think we have to do all of them. You can do them as a homework on your own. But we can go now from our last interaction to the one before, which is to make this whole list scrollable, so that once you are in the preview, you can actually see all of them, because right now they're just static. And the way we will do that, let's see if I will now remember this. So we'll go into container. We will do a scroll container. We will draw it here. And then we will place all of these objects inside. Yes. Okay. Let me do this again a bit slower. So I now have again a problem that I have a bit of a mess here because I don't know what's underneath all of this, what's rectangle 1, what's rectangle 2. So let's just give this a little bit of an order. So this thing is a separator. A line actually, yeah, okay. This is a title. This is background. And what I have underneath. So I can also, of course, hide all of the objects. I can do that by clicking here. And then I don't see anything that's on top. So I see what this text is, and it's station button. And this is the icon. Okay, and now I can see all of these things again. Now I know what the elements are. Okay, and now we're going to put this whole list, so not just the text, but also the background and the title and the separator. We're going to put it into a scroll container. So a container on its own, as we already saw, is basically just a group. It doesn't do much on its own except link elements together within the relationships that they have, so however far they are or whatever. A scrolling container and a paging container are then interactive containers. So the difference between them, and we can also change that into the design section later on if we want, is that a scroll container has an interaction up and down, while a paging container would have interaction like this. So if I try to show it on my phone, this would be a scroll container. Like you scroll like this, you go up and you go down. And a paging is more kind of like what Instagram does. So you go left and right to go from one content into the next. And what we want in our case, we want up and down. So we want scroll. And we're going to create a scroll container. And here we're going to define the area in which this scroll can happen. And I want it to only happen within this list here. So if I would scroll here, I don't want anything to happen. I want it to only be limited to this thing here. So I'm going to draw this thing around. And of course, limited to where the interaction can be. So it ends where the screen ends, because I can't scroll where my phone isn't. So I have my container. I'm going to put it in the center. And now I have to put things inside of this container. And I'm going to put all of these things inside. So we have all of our 5 stations. We have our separator, we have our title, and our background. All of these things will go inside of the scroll container. And you will see that also this, it looks like it cut it away. It didn't actually cut it away. It just means that you don't see it anymore because you have to scroll to be able to see it. So let's see it on our preview. I don't see anything else except the 3 stations, but once I scroll, then I see the rest of the list as well. And let's see if this works on our phones as well. So device, and we connect to our phone. And we have our list, and it's scrollable. At least it is for me. How is it for you guys? Is it working? Did you get lost at some point? Should I repeat something? Or can we go on?
The thing doesn't work for me, so I can't scroll.
You cannot scroll.
No, I can't.
Okay, but you do have a scrolling container.
Yes.
You did that. Okay. I'm guessing that the thing that maybe you're missing is to put components inside of this container.
Oh, yeah.
So they can't be a separate
Yeah,
element. You need to put them inside, and then it should work.
Yeah, now it works.
Yeah, okay, awesome. Other questions or problems? No? Okay, then we can move on. So we have our last interaction, we have our middle interaction, and now we want the first interaction actually, which is when we press this button, this thing pops up. So we can again do this in a few different ways. We've seen the opacity in the voice example, so that something goes from 0 to 100, and the other things go, and the other thing goes, so from 0 to 1, the other one then goes from 100 to 0. But let's, in this case, let's do it with the reordering, which is a bit of a different approach, but also sometimes works nicely. And this just means that we will put kind of like a separating layer in between this list, the separator, and the icon that is blinking, like the battery GIF that we have. And this in-between thing will literally just be a white square. So currently it's gray. But let's make it white, because we don't want the user to actually see it. We just want it to be a part of how we program our interaction. And this thing will come in between the container and this station button and the icon. Let's call it separation square. And now we will bring to the front and bring to the back certain objects. And this is how our interaction in this case will look. So what we're going to do is so let's say that we are here. When you tap on this button, I want the container to jump to the front. And when I tap outside of the container, I want the container to go away again. So I want this loop in between the button and kind of the background. So the button brings up the list and the background takes it away. So that's what we will do. Let's see if this works for us. Okay, so again, we're going to have to start from back to forth. So we have our list open, but once I click on to the background, so onto what is not a list, so here on the right, on the left, I want the list to go away and bring forward the icon and the button. So how I will do this, I click onto this separation square. I add a trigger that is tap. And on this tap, we will do reorder. And we will do two things. So our container one will go completely to the background. So we have here options: bring forward, send backward, completely to front, or completely to back. So we want reorder. We want, here we again need to choose which object is the one that needs to have a response, because in this case, our object and the response will be two different objects. So we will click here, but this thing will actually go away. So container one, this is what I choose here. So which thing to reorder? We choose container one, and it will go completely into the back. As that happens, I want to bring completely to the front. So again, a reorder. And let's just link these two things together. So, like I said, you can group it into a container. How I did this, sorry if this was too fast. So I chose these two elements. I know that they're underneath, so I don't have to see them, but it's the button and the icon. I right-clicked, and there's group selection. And it basically creates this container, so as we did it before as well. And this container is then the icon with button. So we grouped this so that in our second reordering, so when the list goes completely to the back, this icon and button will come completely to the front. Let me just find them here. Okay, the icon and button, they come completely to the front. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, so this worked. And now we want to add the very last interaction. So we went from back to front. So our last interaction will be to make this button interactive, which makes, we will do it again with reordering, which makes the list pop up. So when, let's hide these elements and let's choose this button here as an object, and we're going to add trigger. And on tap, we are going to do the reorder again, and the reordering will bring, so container one completely to the front in this example. And yeah, let's do it in the same way, reorder, and this one will go completely to the back. So reorder and the icon button go completely to the back. We don't necessarily have to do this. The only thing that it means, and you will see this as well, is so when you scroll, if you don't put this separator in between, you would still see the icon underneath. If that doesn't bother you, you can do it, but it usually bothers me. So let's see this in preview. If this was too fast, we can repeat some things. So charging stations, let's see if this works. So we tab this and it's not working. Okay, so why is it not working? Okay, so we have our object, we have our tap onto that object. So that part is okay. We have reorder, and we put our container one. It doesn't work because it's hidden. Okay, so let's try again. Preview. Okay, and we have charging stations. We click on this. We get our list. We can scroll on this list. So this is what I mean. Once you get, like, as you scroll through this, if we don't have a white separator, then you would see the design underneath. If you don't have a problem with that, then you don't have to do a separator, but usually I do. So I do it like this. So we can scroll through this, and let's also see if our button works. So it linked me to the Google website. So that's what I wanted, and that's okay, and I'm happy with that. And as I click outside of this list, I am again brought into this main screen with the button. So I press on this, I press outside, and I have this loop in between the elements. Okay. And we're just going to change one more thing. I think it shouldn't affect our interaction, but let's see. We're just going to change in here in between layers. So layers work here the same as they work in all other programs as well. As they are presented here, it means that they're stacked on top of each other. But however, when I open this screen, I don't want the list to be the first thing I see. I actually want to first see the icon and then the container. So if I go into the preview, this is the first screen that I want to see. When I press on this, I get a list. I can scroll on the list. I can press on this thing. It gives me a link. That's good. And if I press outside, then I get the main screen again. So this is what I wanted to achieve. Okay. How's it going? Did it work? Do you have issues? Do you have questions? Did you get lost?
Yeah, a question. So when I open the list and exit via the cross on the left top side and come back to the charge screen, then the list is still open. Is this?
Yeah. Yes, this was this very, very last thing that I did here. So these layers, you see?
Yeah.
So they always follow each other from bottom as you would stack paper, right? So you need to reorder these two things so that the container with the list and all the stations is the very last thing, is the very last layer. Then comes the separation. Then comes the icon and the button, which is this thing.
Yeah, I already did this, and on the first time when I came from the home screen, it works. But when I open the list and go back to the home screen and then return to the where the charging button.
Huh? Okay, so this is what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So you have charging station, this opens, then you press here, and then you press this again, and you still have a list. This is the interaction. So I planned that you go away from this list if you press outside of the list, but not go outside of the whole sketch. So if you try to just click somewhere on the whiteness, it should take you back. But this only works if you have this separation square in between.
Okay, yeah, it works, yeah.
Okay.
So this already works, yeah. But when I open the list and I stayed open, and then I go back via the cross, yeah, to the home screen.
Yeah.
And come back, should the list be open or in the background?
Yes, we didn't change that.
Okay.
We can change this, however.
Okay.
So a way to do this would be to. So there is a thing that is called restart, or is it just start? Start after jump. Okay, and restart every time. Okay, it's this thing here. It doesn't, so there is no object to it specifically, but you can add a trigger, and it's this start thing, and start after jump and reset every time, which means that every time that you jump from one to the other one, the whole screen resets. So it's a different thing. You have to program it if you want it to be there. Let's see if we did this correctly. So you click on the charging stations, you get a list, you go outside, and now when you press, it didn't work. Okay. But it should work. So why doesn't it? Start after jump, start with jump. Maybe this is the difference. So we get our list, we go out, we go into charge, and it still didn't reset. Okay, let's do one other thing. So this is also a very good thing with ProtoPie. You see these little question marks here, and you see them actually with everything that we're doing. Next to every single thing that you have, there is a little question mark. And when you click on this question mark, it opens a link that gives you further explanation. So let me see what they say about start. The type of trigger that is activated automatically when a prototype is run. Okay, so I would say when you start, you need to reset whole scene. Okay, we forgot the last step. I was so much talking about you need all 3 steps, and then I forgot the last step. Okay, so the start is the trigger. So when you jump from one scene into the next scene, what happens? The whole scene resets. So now it should work. Okay, that was that. So this just means that the whole situation will start again from scratch, regardless of where you left off. If you don't say this specifically, then your scene will always stay where you've left off. So you need to give it a specific command. Did that work for you too?
Yeah, it worked. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have other questions? No? Okay. Then thanks for this question. This was a good question, and I'm happy that we included it, because if you wouldn't ask, I wouldn't have included it, but I think it's a cool thing. Okay, anyway, so we have our last example of today, which is the tilt thing. So whenever in my screen I kind of move from left to right, after a certain point, I want there to be a change. We're just going to make it a color change to keep it easy so that we don't complicate too much. It's already late in the day, but okay. So we're going to start with a shape that will visually indicate the road. So we're just going to keep it for like half of the screen. Kind of like, let's say like this. And maybe let's just make it a little bit darker so that it's more fake road. We need to now give it origin into the center. In this case, this is going to be really important because we want it to always move from the center. So if we would have forgotten to change this origin and would leave it somewhere here, then when we tilt, it means that it tilts around this point, but we want it to tilt around the center. Actually, maybe we will even change this to up here. Let's see how it works first. And then once we have this object, let's add a trigger, and that trigger will be tilt here within sensors. And is it y-axis? I think it is. Let me just quickly check this. Tilt Z. I'm not sure if that should be Z. No, it is. It should be Z. Okay. So it basically is just a difference whether you're moving it like this, or like this. So these are the 3 options, and I'm always a bit confused what it is because we have a bit of a different layout here because it's not vertical like we have it in landscape. But you can try out these 3 things. You can see how different interaction becomes once you're moving around in this 3-axis. So what we want to happen is we want this thing to rotate. So this thing here. We need to, again, select an object because we said rotate, but we didn't specify which thing should rotate. So we choose our rectangle. It's the only thing that we have. We want it to, or do we want it to be smooth? No, it can be, it doesn't have to be smooth. But here we can kind of change how we want this rotation to be. And then this is then the interesting part. Degree of tilt and rotation of rectangle. So how much I rotate versus how much this thing rotates. And I needed quite some trial and error here, to be completely honest, but I'm just going to give you the numbers now. So this basically means that when I tilt for 30 degrees, this thing moves also for 30 degrees, but in the opposite direction, so that it's also actually in the same direction as this if I'm trying to imitate the road. And then if I do the same in the other direction, the square will move for the same amount of degree. But whenever I go more than that, that shouldn't work anymore. And I can also choose the angle here. I think we have the correct one, but let me check this thing. So I have 30, 30, and it goes in the other direction. Okay. Let's try this, because like I said, it's a lot of trial and error, and it doesn't always work for me either. But let's do this. Okay, run. Actually, it works for me quite well. I have to say I'm quite happy with this. Is this working for you guys also? Or are you having issues? I guess up until now, it was quite simple. What I had a lot of problems with was kind of figuring out what the relationship of the tilt and the rotation is for it to go into the direction that I want, but not too much, but also not in a weird origin point. Like this took some trial and error. So if you have some issues, please let me know. I did as well. But if you don't, then I'm going to continue with this sketch. So as you saw, when I was moving it around, I got a lot of white space just because this thing wasn't big enough. So let's just make it a bunch bigger so that we don't have any white space when we're rotating it around. And then what we also want to do, center, where is center here? What we also want to do is kind of give it a maximum. So when you reach a maximum, it stops rotating and it turns red, let's say. In my case, in the sketch that I showed before, it also displayed not really an error message, but yeah, like a line of caution. There is a risk of falling, please pay attention. What we are going to do, we are going to change the color of this. So we're just going to keep on adding responses onto this same trigger. So this is what we can do. We can add as many responses as we want. We can also give them like a delay if we would want to do that. This one doesn't have an option of a delay, but maybe this one does. This one does, for example. So, so this is going back. So this is closing our scene, but I could say only do this response 3 seconds after I click, because maybe I want in between the animation to start, and maybe I want some sound, and maybe I want whatever things else to happen, and only then do you do this thing. So you could have as many responses as you want just listed there under one trigger, and this is what we're going to do. So we want to have the rotation of this thing as well as it turning red once it reaches a certain point. Okay, and here we first are going to set it on to the color that it is right now. So we're going to redo this actually. So have from 30 to -30. 30, right? Yes. And when it is in this range, it is dark gray. And when it goes over this range, so we can add a second range with this plus icon here. Will this work? How was it done here? No, it was done like this. Okay. Okay. So when you go, so 30, yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought a little bit. So when you go from 30 degrees to 30 degrees, everything is still fine because you can lean in each direction and there's no danger. But when you go over that, and we're going to say once you come to 45, then you're in the danger zone, and then things will start becoming red. Now let's see how this works. So let's say 40, 45 degrees, and red. So why not?
I copied the hexadecimal code from the preview and pasted it in the field.
But so it also didn't work for you, but that's odd because before it did, didn't it? So still no. Because we don't have an object selected. Maybe that's why. But now it works. Okay. So I forgot this thing if you haven't noticed it. So I didn't choose a thing here. I didn't choose an object. I needed to tell Protopie that I want the color change to happen on this thing. And then the fill color is okay. Okay, I think that this should work. I'm not 100% sure. Let's try. Okay, so we got our phones. Okay, and run. Okay, and it's not the same shade. Okay, it's okay. Okay, but it does turn red. Okay. And that's what we wanted to do. So, okay, I'm happy with this. I'm not happy with the fact that it's not actually the same color. So let's change the fill color of this one so that it's okay. And now we have this. Okay. Did this work for you as well? The color change? So we first have the rotation of the object linked together with the degree of tilt. So we also have a little bit of an explanation here in Protopie on what this numbers mean, so that's convenient. And then in the second stage, we have range 1 and range 2, both of them are linked to, so the tilt and in which color the object, so this square is in which space or like degree of tilt. And so within this second range, then we have a color change. It becomes red here, and in between 30 to minus 30, then it's gray. Okay, and we can add one more thing, can we? Maybe we can do it through opacity. Okay, we're going to display also a word of caution. So once you reach this extreme tilt, so once you come to 45 degrees, we also want there to be text that says caution. So I'm going to give it just a bit of the same visual appearance as we had with everything else. So it's bold, it can be black, but maybe this one can be a bit bigger because it's an important message. In the center, and let's give it spacing. How much did we give it? 15 maybe? 15 looks okay. And because it's not a button, I don't think it needs any other additional visual elements. I'm just going to leave it as it is. I think I'm happy with this. And so I'm going to want it to go from 0 to 100 once you reach 45 degrees of tilt. So if you're not doing anything, this text will actually be 0. So let's go into this layer. Let's call it caution so that I know what this layer is. And I'm going to put its opacity to 0, because if everything is normal, I don't want to see this error message. I only want to see it as a response to the tilt. So a response to the tilt, which is opacity. It could also be a color change. Let's say that before it's white and we now turn it into black. Like I said, ProtoPie has a lot of different options of how you could maybe achieve the same thing. So we have opacity of the caution layer. We always need to choose here the layer. So this is what I forgot in the color change. And we have, so we're going to use the same range as here. So we go from 45 to minus 45. And we want this layer to get to 100 opacity. Okay, I think that this should work. Let's try it again. Run. No, it's not. Okay, so what is actually happening in my screen? Maybe the same thing is happening in your screen. So there is actually no change in between red and gray. So I always get this caution message. And I think I always get this caution message because I need to give it a range. So I now only say go to 100 between 40 and 45, but I think I need to say that in between 30 and minus 30, it needs to be 0. I think this was my error. Let's see if I'm correct here. So we're literally going to copy the exact same logic as we had before. So this is our default. This is when things are okay. This object is gray. So when things are okay, the opacity of this caution text is 0. And only once we come into this extreme space, only then does it get displayed. Okay. Theoretically, that should be it. Yeah. So that's how it looks for me. So once I'm within the space, things are okay. It's just wobbling around. And then only once I get over 45 degrees, does it turn red and I get the word of caution, like not really the error message, but like, yeah. Okay. Okay. Worked, didn't work, issues, questions, problems? No? Okay. So then this was also the last sketch that we needed to do today, so we can just save our thing. I have a few more things to say about what we're going to do next time and what how your student projects should look like. So I'm going to move back to my PowerPoint presentation. But if there are still any ProtoPie questions, we would still have a few minutes to discuss things if anything is unclear to you while I'm still here in the program. So hopefully all of these things are working for you. So you have the home screen and you have all these three buttons interactive. And once you come to each screen, you have all the interactions there. So we have this button here, we have the scrollable list that pops up, and then the go button that opens the link. Here we have the microphone, so when we tap on this, it starts to listen to a voice command that we say, and it opens an external link. And here we had the tilt example, and when we come to the extreme, it displays a word of caution. And that was our 3 examples. So no questions? You're all doing okay? Cool. Okay. Then I switch to PowerPoint. Okay. Yes. Okay. We see this. So this is where we left off. We did the home screen example. We did the voice example, battery, tilt. We didn't do this one. So next week on Wednesday, I will show you how to connect ProtoPie to Arduino. So these were also some of the examples that you saw here, and I'm going to recreate this horn example. So when you press an external button, it triggers a sound from my phone. So if you have access to Arduino, again, you are invited to follow along. I'm not sure if you all have these things. So if you don't have them, of course, you probably won't be able to follow along, but I still decided to show this to you because I think it's a really good connection. It's a really easy program to use together with Arduino and prototype this kind of interactions. So even if maybe you won't use it now, so that is next week, I think it's still good to know how the connection works and what is possible, because maybe you're gonna find need for it sometime other in the future. So you can come back to it and be like, oh yeah, right, we did that. How did we do it? But if you are at least a little bit of Arduino savvy, we're not gonna do anything complex. It's just a button example. But if you have an Arduino board, and yeah, so we would need a breadboard, we would need a button, a 10K resistor, some jumper wires, and a connection cables. So first from Arduino to desktop to be able to upload the code to the Arduino, and then from Arduino to mobile to be able to connect the Arduino to your phone. And then this is the app that you additionally need to download on your phone so that ProtoPie can communicate together with the Arduino. I'm going to explain this connection a little bit more into detail next time. But if anybody has these things at home or can have access to them within the next week, then please prepare them till Wednesday. That's what we will be doing. Yes, I'm going to explain all of this next time. Okay, and then I just want to say a few more things about your project. So, like I said, you will need to make your own ProtoPie project at the end of this course. So you have like roughly 2 weeks to do it. It will need to be dashboard features for a vehicle of the future, something similar to what we did today. Hopefully not literally the same. You can go into more complex features that I haven't showed today. Of course, there is a lot more to ProtoPie that we didn't go through. I guess you got a sense of it also when we looked through triggers. There's a lot more that we didn't use. When we looked at responses, there's a lot more that we didn't use. So you can go through the program a lot on your own as well. So the projects that you develop in the end, you can work on it either individually or in a pair, so that 2 people would work together. We would generally prefer that you work 2 people together in a group, because we've seen that projects where people collaborate tend to be a bit more complex and a bit more thought out, and also maybe conceptually more interesting, because people can like separate certain things that need to be done, so you can consequentially achieve more. However, we know that it might be difficult to work in a pair, because obviously most of us have to be at home. I don't know how much you guys see each other. I don't even know where you guys live. I don't even know if you're in Linz. So if you want to work individually, of course, feel free to work individually as well. That's fine. What we expect is for each person to implement at least 2 features. So as you saw today, these examples, like it doesn't take so much time to implement like 1 feature. So 1 feature might be more than just 1 interaction. It might be a chunk of interactions, but 1 feature is basically like 1 scene as we did them today. So within the last 2-3 hours, we did 4. So I think 2 shouldn't take too much. If you have more inspiration, by all means, please do more. We're going to be very happy to see them. And if you work in a pair, that also means 2 per person. So then your project needs to have at least 4. And then this is just one thing that I added here. So you can have either a design-driven approach to this project or a technology-driven approach. So usually we would be in favor of the design-driven approach. So this means that you first go through the ideation phase. You think about what is, so in our case, what is the vehicle? What is the target group? What is the user doing in that specific case? Are their hands full? Is their focus somewhere else? Do they have a lot of time, or are they in a hurry? Kind of like what is happening, and then how does that affect the design and or interaction? And then you would probably map out the interactions on paper first. So I also did it like this for the KTM dashboard. I first drawn out these scenes. I was like, okay, what would a user need when they're driving? And I was like, oh, probably this, probably that, probably that. Okay, and then how each scene would kind of, which elements would it need, which graphical elements, as well as which kind of interaction modalities. May that be inputs or outputs? Does the user need kind of feedback or not? So this is a design-driven approach. It is much more like heavy concept heavy. However, like I said already before, this isn't a design course, so we won't actually judge your creativity. You can also approach a technology-driven approach, because this is still a course about a software, so about ProtoPie. You can also just go through the program and kind of explore a lot of the features that we didn't talk about today. So you can go also very into complex stuff. For example, ProtoPie can do like variables or conditions, so where one element would automatically affect the other, or you would have yeah, like I also mentioned, connecting two phones to each other so that one interacting on one would affect objects on the other one. So this is also something that I didn't show today, but I think is quite interesting. Then variables, yeah, for example, something happens only after the 6th time when I press on a button. The first 5 times nothing happens, and only the 6th time it happens. Things like this. So you can go through ProtoPie and just try out different things, and then that would spark kind of ideas on what you could implement for your vehicle of the future. So these are the 2 approaches. You can do it however you want. Here are also some additional links for you to look into. So as I already shown in ProtoPie, next to almost anything, you have this little icon there. Actually, let me show this again, because this is a really cool thing. So we have like, okay, so this is variables is something that I mentioned. So already here you can learn more, or whenever you would add a trigger next to every single thing, you would have this question mark that leads you then to the website where you can read more about this specific function. So the same goes for responses. Once you click on this, there's a question mark next to everything. There's a question mark here. There's also a question mark also in this like panel for additional design or whatever additional things are necessary. So ProtoPie is really like helpful and friendly in this case. It really gives you a lot of like explanation for things, so they don't just assume that you know. It's like, oh yeah, okay, fine, let me give you more information on this. So this is one thing that you can look into. Then I'm also sharing here 2 links. So one is also tutorials that ProtoPie is offering. I've noticed that a lot of them are connected to Arduino, so maybe this won't be so relevant for you, but there are these more complex things that I also mentioned, like variables and formulas. I've seen a few tutorials there on these kind of subjects. So this might help you as well if you want to go through this approach. And then also a good thing that I think is done on the ProtoPie website. So this is just all done on their website, is featured prototypes. So this is just different examples of what people are doing in ProtoPie. It's obviously not dashboards, it's usually apps, whatever, music players or whatever kind of apps, but still maybe if you look through them, it sparks a bit of new ideas on at least what kind of interaction you could use or what is possible. You could say like, oh yeah, I could translate that into a communication with a vehicle or something like this. So these are the 3 things that I would recommend that you look further into. And then just the last word that I want to say is about what's going to happen on Wednesday and then further on. So this is kind of the timeline for your projects. So we will do on Wednesday, we again have a slot of like 3 hours and something. I will show this Arduino example, which will maybe take like 1 hour or even less. And then I would like to use the remaining time to kind of give you feedback on your projects. So I would ask each of you or each group to present very shortly, just like a few slides on what the idea is. So towards what you would like to be working on, what is the concept, what is the idea? And then a short ProtoPie demo of kind of where you are, what kind of interactions you want to implement, what you tried to implement but haven't figured out yet. What isn't clear to you, or what you did manage to already get working and it looks super cool, and then we can all be excited about it. However far you are in the project, obviously I know that it's just 1 week away, so I'm not expecting anything final, but just to kind of give this intermediate feeling of where you guys are, so that I can also give you some feedback and we can have a bit of a like a Q&A thing of whatever is unclear. Because I guess maybe now that you were just following along steps, maybe things were kind of easy, but once you get in the program on your own, maybe new questions will arise. So we can go through them together on Wednesday. So that's what we're going to do on Wednesday. So that's this first part. And then after that, you will have one additional week. So until the 26th of January, although we don't actually have a course then anymore, we don't see each other, but you will have this additional week to fix things or implement new things of whatever we will talk about, and then just upload the final ProtoPie sketch onto the cloud or in our emails or whatever we will decide. And also a little bit of like side material. So as a lot of these interactions are just happening on the phone, you might need to record videos of how it's working or give us some images or some slides if it's really conceptual. So any kind of surrounding material that we would need and the ProtoPie sketch. So this is what you will need to do kind of like at the end of this course. This is what we expect to see from you. And I think this is it from my side. Yes, this is it from my side. Do you still have any questions about whatever, about ProtoPie, about projects, about timelines, or anything else that might be unclear? No? Is everything clear? Everything is okay? Cool. Then that's it from my side. I mean, yeah, we still have 15 minutes, but if you don't have questions, then I think it's not really necessary that I just continue talking about pointless stuff. So yeah, thank you very much for joining. I hope this was clear to you. I hope I didn't go too fast or that things were confusing. But if they were, please write to me because I would like to hear some feedback as well. And yeah, otherwise, see you on Wednesday. And thanks for joining.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Ciao.
Bye.
Bye, have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.